This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1055, Comic Shenanigans on Vacation.
But ain't no stopping them shenanigans. No getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. I'm joined by Nathan Struck once again on the show. This is an exciting one because it's a little bit off book in terms of our kind of regular schedule. This is episode 1055. Although I should say this was always scheduled. It's just not one of our usual things. Usually we do comic book creator interviews. We do book of the month clubs. And this time we do a Comic Shenanigans on vacation. So Nate and I took off to the extremely warm confines of Florida. We went to Orlando and went to the Universal Studios Resort to go to something that Nate had only ever heard about, never actually got to see in person, which was the Marvel Island of Adventure. So Nate, what was your first impression of we'll get into the other areas of the theme park, but specifically the thing that drew you there, that drew us there together to make this pilgrimage was to the Universal Marvel Islands of Adventure. So I'm curious what your overall takeaway was.
I mean, first impression, it's not an island. I think the ad in the 90s Marvel Comics depicts it as an ad. And as we're talking, you're like, well, it's not an island. And I'm like, it's an island of adventure. And you're like, yeah, but that's like figurative. I'm like, what? So that was felt a little bit bamboozled, waiting for decades to go and watch, go and view this or enjoy it. But I also very much struck by what you had previously described to me as a bit of a time warp effect. So we walked into the park and we're met with it's the Cafe 4, I think it's called.
Yep.
And you have Adam Kubert art drawing Fantastic Four in again, I can't quite say it's a 90s style because that's just his style. And it stands out. And then you've got like the Silver Surfer swooshing around on the other side. And then there's like a very 90s Xavier in like the Shi'ar chair over on the other side. And so just remarking that I guess I didn't know what to expect in terms of the art. And I certainly didn't expect all of the exterior art. Is that true? At like 100%? I think it was all of the exterior art is Adam Kubert.
I think it was pretty much, yeah. I think the only things we noticed that were specifically seemed to be different artists would seem to be on the interior art in different places.
Yeah. So I imagine normal people are going, wow, Spider-Man. And maybe I've heard of the Fantastic Four from those terrible movies. But, they're a property, and there's the Hulk, and kids love the Hulk, and there's stuff, for fans of the MCU to some extent. And we're walking around seeing if we can name any differences in the artists or, there's another exterior, almost like by decade, they have like a column, an obelisk for each decade that we surmised, right? Like 60s and 70s and 80s and so forth. And we couldn't really name the artist there, but we were just talking about the characters and the incongruent costumes, that certain costumes shouldn't be worn in certain eras. Really probably missing the entire point of the park. But for us, I thought we had a lot of fun, right? Like just even in that looking around rather than running over to rides, I just kind of wanted to soak it all in. And it's got trappings of an almost pseudo New York City kind of street, but it's very colorful. It mostly goes for that vibe. It's very theme parky. And I suppose there's a number of people who are listening to this have already been, and they're just like rolling their eyes and like, yeah, where you been? I've been here. I haven't gone there ever. So to see Mark Bagley art in the Cafe, we spent like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours in the cafe, just like looking and talking at the art, about the art.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like as I mentioned to you, like I have been a few times before. I think I must have been in 99, when it was like a brand new park, which is kind of crazy that I actually got to go there then. And then I went in 2009 with my wife, and then, I went last year, and I think there was maybe one other. So I'd been to most of the stuff, but when we were in that Cap America Cafe, I realized I've never been here. Like we had been to Cafe 4, but there was always something else, and there was always some other place to eat that I'd never made it into that cafe before. So we sit down and we're looking up and seeing all this artwork, and I'm like, I have never seen any of this. And actually, you had a good point that I never really thought about before, is that obviously when you go to theme parks, sometimes you take pictures of stuff, but it is different taking pictures of art that is not anywhere else and likely never will be, and was done, 25 years ago. And who knows what'll happen if eventually they aren't able to have that park anymore. That artwork has just lost to time. Like, it's kind of crazy. And yet over time, I would say probably millions of people have seen it and have gone through that place at some point over the last 25 years. So that's kind of an extra interesting thing, was to look at this art and say, well, this may not exist anymore, so we should probably take pictures of this.
Yeah, I mean, we did look into this because, so one of the impetuses for this was that there had been in the news talks about Disney not renewing Simpsons Land, right? That they were going to either...
Universal. You mean Disney not renewing it with Universal, you mean?
Yeah, their license. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
And so the thought was, oh no, so if Simpsons Land might have, and this hasn't been confirmed, but I think it was like a 2027 maybe decision that they're looking at. So if they weren't going to renew Simpsons Land, which again stands to reason because Disney owns Simpsons now, and why wouldn't they want to make all of the revenue directly? And I suppose they're making tons off the merchandise anyway, and have it be associated with a Disney theme park. Anyway, so that was the kind of thought and worry that, if I don't go to Disneyland, if I don't go to Simpsons Land in the near future, it could be taken down and I'll miss my chance. And then maybe the same thing, and there's been nothing in the news about the Marvel Islands Adventure at all, that it would be taken down, or the license might not be renewed. I didn't even know when it would be renewed, if it was coming up. But I figured, hey, that's kind of just two birds with one stone. And so that was part of the conversation that we had, that maybe one day this will be taken down. And there's very few ways that I know of to see this art. And I hope that there are high quality scans, or that they'll do them before it's just demolished, or maybe it never will be. But for me, who has been around for the last, two decades and a half, while this park has been up, haven't seen any of these images. And I love Adam Kubert, and I love the X-Men, and there's a lot of X-Men images around, and one of the images is a large Rogue image. Huge Rogue fan, never seen that one. The Wolverine looks unique as well. Iceman, Magneto. And so I'm seeing for the first time sensibly 90s art for quote unquote comic books, but not comic books, that I've never seen before, and just kind of going, I don't know, I guess it would just be like, if you had a number of missing 90s comics and they fell into your lap and you went, there's an issue in between this issue and I didn't know about this, or there's hidden pages that are folding out, or can you imagine one of your favorite comics and it had a gatefold, all of a sudden, I didn't know this was here, and you opened it up and there was a massive splash page from one of your favorite artists. It's just kind of a weird, surreal moment to have one foot in this land that is clearly occupied by a lot of fans of the MCU, and then Adam and I walking around as crazy comic book guys who also love 90s comics, and again, the continuity that gets referenced, they're kind of quote unquote allowed to reference and not, and we had that dinner where we paid to have the actors come and visit our table in Cafe 4, and so we saw Rogue in her 90s Jim Lee costume, and then Storm in like an early 2000s kind of just before she changed her costume with the wedding with Black Panther, and then a MCU looking Captain America, and then like a astonishing X-Men Cassaday costume for Wolverine, and Spider-Man, like an interesting kind of assemblage of 6 heroes and of course a Cyclops who is dressed not like any Cyclops from any comic. He's in the Cassaday astonishing costume, but with the long trench coat, which is from Wolverine and the X-Men, the cartoon. So if you're someone like who, oh man, I want to correct everybody who gets things wrong about comics, or doesn't has universes collide and doesn't enjoy cosplay that amalgamates different sources, you would hate it. But I go with the flow, enjoy what's there, and even to talk to the actors and see how close they'll toe the lines, like what they're allowed to reference and what they're not allowed to reference. Like Storm is still married to T'Challa in this reality of the island, but the Rogue can talk about how Anna Paquin portrayed her in the Fox movies, but they can't talk about like Civil War or like Endgame, I guess, but they can talk about X-Men 97, but they can't talk about Krakoa. But Wolverine also gave us a great recommendation for bourbon, like just like at the park. So the park exists, but the MCU doesn't, right? Like, It's fascinating. I'm sure Rogue isn't married to Gambit. I didn't even ask her.
No, you didn't ask her.
Not that it would mean anything, right? Because she would just go, "Oh no, we're dating and everything. I think he's just fine, but like, whatever, right? Like, I'm in a love triangle with Bobby or something. Like, who knows what she would say, right?"
Yeah,
I guess Magneto also would be a good one there.
So a few quick points. So first, I did double check. It's technically known as Marvel Superhero Island. So I always thought of it as Marvel's Islands of Adventure, but apparently I was wrong. Or
wasn't it? Yeah, original, right? Maybe originally.
Yeah, it might be what it was. What's interesting is that originally it was conceived as DC Superhero Land back in like 1989.
Really?
Yeah, like Universal itself opened in 1990, but they already had thoughts about having another park. Or no, I guess it was Warner Brothers thought about maybe making a park. Anyways, it obviously didn't end up working out, and eventually we get Marvel, which is kind of crazy.
Batman 89 would have maybe metastasized that for them, right? Like the Marvel that's just terrible accidental pun, or non-pun. The money that brought in and the attention that brought in, how rejuvenated, like Batman had a massive media event. That would be incredible to have a Batman land and a Burton-esque Batman. Could you imagine that enshrined almost in amber?
But I guess it looks like what happened instead is Time Warner acquired Six Flags. And then they had the ability to have the full license with Six Flags, which leads into future rides like the Superman ride, et cetera. So, I mean, they did end up getting some stuff. But, like the fact that there is this kind of weird Marvel land that exists, and I kept saying, like, it's the land that time forgot. Like, everything is such a weird, different time period. It's really fun for us because we remember that time period, and we were, it also makes me feel old that it's been around 25 years, and yet it still feels like, something from my youth. Like, it's still, what I like about it in general, and I've gone on a lot about this in the past, is that I love old school comic coloring, and the coloring of a lot of these images felt like not flat in a bad way, but they felt like, 4-color process. I'm sure it was digital, but it didn't feel overly rendered like you see a lot of comics these days. Like when I close my eyes and think about comics in 2004, I think of that deep, heavy reds that Frank Darmatta used in everything, like Avengers Disassembled. If you go back and look at it now, you're like, man, so much red. Because they had all these tools they could use now, and they could really add so much textures, but I also feel that sometimes they go too far, and there's something about the simplicity of the 4-color world, whereas all the art that's out there feels very vibrant. It doesn't feel like it's trying too much with too many different textures or too many, gradients, and it's a lot simpler, and it really pops more. Like everything really pops out at you when you're walking up and down the street. There's a lot of small details that, I really enjoy, like on the way to Dr. Doom's Free Fall, you're at the corner of Stanley Avenue or in Yancey Street, which is a nice, kind of reference. We should talk about the rides. So there's only 4 actual rides in the Marvel area. The first one that you see is the Incredible Hulk Coaster, which was, when I saw it in 99, very exciting because I hadn't been on anything like it that really rocketed you out. And instead of being, especially at the time, most roller coasters were much more of the tick, 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 tick variety as you kind of slowly get raised up and then go down.
I appreciate you that's great for radio. I like that you showed it with
I know, right?
Adam, I appreciate the onomatopoeia, and I think your listeners will know exactly that feeling and what kind of ride you're talking about.
Whereas this one just shoots you out of a cannon, basically. And I remember at the time that being so heavily described, like, this is so different. It shoots you out like I forget how fast it was, but they were saying like it's like being shot out of a jet. And it still feels that way. Like it's, it still works, well, obviously it still works. It's 25 years later and people aren't dying, but it's still an exciting ride. But it's interesting. We went on all this stuff first. We did all the Marvel stuff first, and then we went to other places in the park. And what dawned on me, and I'm more aware of it now, especially going with you and seeing it through your eyes because you're seeing this for the first time, is how, because the Marvel stuff was all 25 years ago, and they haven't really been able to make a lot of updates since, a lot of their theming in terms of the queue is a lot more half-baked. Whereas you can see that as the years go on, more and more money goes into this stuff, and like then you start getting rides like the Jurassic Park Velocicoaster, because suddenly you have Chris Pratt's in the in the pre-roll video and Bryce Dallas Howard. The people from the movies are doing sections that are in the intro videos that you're watching while you're in the queue. Whereas when we're in the line for Incredible Hulk, that's not it. It's like a random video of like something that should be a guy being gamma irradiated, but like it's just a dude. And even like the She-Hulk kind of stand-in, like we don't know these people. They're not any version of that character, because in '99 no one besides Lou Ferrigno had ever been the Hulk, and they weren't getting him for this. So it's just very interesting that it hasn't really evolved. But then we go. The next ride next to it is the Storm has a ride, which is basically just a spinny ride. Not super complicated. They don't do a lot with the theming. There's a little bit of voiceover, but not much else. There's a Spider-Man ride, which was the talk of the town for like the first 11 years it was there, which is like a dark 3D ride. And that one had a really good theming, because it just kind of leaned into being a comic book. So you walk through and you're walking through the offices of the Daily Bugle. You're seeing art everywhere. All these, stories about Spider-Man, who's probably, the reason for all these crimes. You're having this video that is kind of, it feels very throwback now. I wonder how I felt in '99, because it's a cartoon that does not feel as good graphically as the '94 animated series. Like, it feels like a step back from that. But now that you go, it has this quaintness to it. You're kind of like, oh, this is fun. It has some of the same designs in the characters, like Doc Ock, etc., that they would have had in the '94 cartoon, but it doesn't use the voices from the '94 cartoon, doesn't look as good as the '94 cartoon, but still has a really fun, hokey charm as you see this whole story of, the Doc Ock and a bunch of other criminals, and now Spider-Man has to go fight them. And then when you're, like with most rides of this kind, you experience the action as a weird bystander who has to be like saved by the hero most of the time, to varying effect, because we saw this in Harry Potter. If we had gone on the Fast and the Furious ride, we would have experienced it there as well. The Transformers ride was like this. Like, there's a lot of, you're in a car experiencing the action with and alongside the hero, and then you get saved by them.
Yeah, and I would say Spider-Man definitely for me, even though I do love rides, I do love roller coasters. That's my favorite kind of ride. I did have a fatigue with the same, and even though it was different, it ultimately is that same kind of experience of there's a screen, maybe you have 3D glasses, maybe you don't. They're going to spritz you with a little bit of water sometimes, maybe they'll give you a little bit of a heat effect, and that 4D stuff is kind of fun. But over and over again, maybe not so much. And so I'm not like the biggest expert in these kinds of screen rides. But my understanding is that in '99, Spider-Man was like it was singular. It was kind of one of the first of its kind. It really does, its 4D effects, I think, are some of the best for some reason. Maybe I'm biased. But to learn, and we were looking this up in the line as we were walking through the Daily Bugle, to queue up, that they switched to HD. They had to, obviously, at some point, they had originally a standard definition presentation, and they HDified it. And the CG that is the Spider-Man ride itself, the visuals, still holds up. Like you see a cartoon version of these characters, like you were saying, Adam, and then that gets translated to this kind of, I don't know if there's any hand drawing in it at all, but it's also an animated CG ride effect. And for some reason, like, think about CG at the time of like 1999. You can think about the Star Wars prequels and how they redid. This is like multi-million-dollar Industrial Light and Magic, the best of the best. And you go back and you watch it now, and you're like, this is the worst Jabba Hutt I've ever seen. Or I can clearly see like where the strings are or where the seams are. So I don't know what magic they worked, but I can only imagine in '99 you swear you were looking at Spider-Man. You could swear that you were swinging through the streets. You'd be flummoxed about how good it was. So for it to hold up this long, and so it was the standout for me, mostly because of the theming, in terms of rides. And the Doctor Doom Tower of Fright was maybe the opposite of all of this, right? The theming wasn't really good or accurate. The video, rather than it being about the Fantastic Four trying to stop Dr. Doom and you're recruited to be with them and be the Fantastic Fifth, is almost a it's a post-war black and white film that's set in Latveria, done by the Latvian state as propaganda for why Doctor Doom is the best, but it's done with like American, like, hey, it's Doctor Doom is here to fight the good fight. Like, it's an odd mishmash of an American post-war propaganda aesthetic to talk about how Doctor Doom is going to make a ray using fear juice. And the Fantastic Four only appear as statues, but then you go into the ride, which took like forever I don't know why it took so long to get through. Even 2 times. We lined up once because we thought we could get in between 2 different events really quick, because the queue prediction estimated time was always very low, because it's the worst ride. And then it never seems to move, and then you finally get in, and then they have the seats are all like 1, 2, 3, 4, and they have like the blue and white colors for Fantastic Four, and you're going, are we going to see some sort of interaction? Is Reed going to stretch us and save us, or is Sue going to put up an invisible? That'd be very cute, by the way, if they did that and said, the reason why you didn't crash from the tower is because Sue Storm must be here, and she's using an invisible barrier, which is perfect, because like, who can prove she's not doing that? They don't show up. They don't do anything. We have locally in Toronto, a theme park that does a tower drop, and more traditional. You don't know when that's going to click. It takes you all the way up very slowly. You see way too far into the horizon. You regret your decisions up to this point. Then they make you pause and wait there, and then they'll do that little click and drop, and it's terrifying. But they don't do that there. It's a rocket right up to the top, and you kind of bungee 3 times down in a very almost soothing way, in a very disappointing way. And no, I didn't hear anyone scream.
Very soothing. You're right.
Yeah, it was the least terrifying. So I was reticent to do it because I've already done tower drops before. I wanted to get to everything unique I could. And Adam, you were like, we're doing everything. We're going to 100% this thing. And I'm like, spoken like a true platinum man, right? And I'm glad I did it, but I don't need to do it again.
No, it was not great. That's for sure. We did kind of go past, obviously, the fact that, we did do a Marvel character dining experience. So we got, we got to go to the Cafe 4, have a buffet, and we got, these experiences. And it's interesting. It was interesting to do it with you because I'd done it with my kids last year. So obviously it's very different because the idea, when you're with your kids, everything's about them and trying to curate their experience, make sure they have the best experience possible. And now I'm focusing on you as my adult kid. But when I have my kids there, so like when you have a character one at a time would come over to the table, they'd chat with the kids, then we'd snap a picture, and then we get another one and we kind of go through the cycle. And so it's interesting how I felt. And I don't know if it's just because the conversation was different, but I felt like when we did it, it felt like they were constantly coming, like so fast, like Fast and the Furious.
They were, yeah, one after the other.
But when I was with the kids, it didn't feel as fast. It felt like, okay, we got one, here comes the next one. But when we were doing it, it was just like bang, 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 and then it was over, and I'm like, like it was almost like it happened so fast, and then we were done. So we, continued to enjoy our meal, have conversation. We weren't really in any hurry to go anywhere. The entire place fills out for the most part, except for I think one other table. And then Spider-Man just kind of comes over and strikes up a conversation. And I'm like, well, this is bonus content. We didn't pay for this. This is extra.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, like, you kind of have this dialogue because we were talking about, where to get a bourbon, and you asked Spider-Man, and I thought very much in character. He's like, well, I can't answer that. I'm not even 21. Not that you can know that. And, he, calls over Wolverine. And that was probably my favorite part because the look on Wolverine's face when Spider-Man's like, come over here. He's like, no. And he's just shaking his head like he doesn't want to come over. He's like, come on. And
he's like done. He's done for his shift. He's already done the pictures, but he's
already done the picture. Why do I have to go back over and talk to these people? Like, although it was just the characters kind of talking amongst each other. So he comes over, and then you ask him the question, and the look in his eyes, he lit up, and he was like, all right, you're asking me a question I can get into. You're not just asking me about comics or, something about Wolverine.
But it's still very perfectly in character as Wolverine, though. Like, if Wolverine's going to talk about drinking or something, or I also really liked that he was a shorter guy. He was a shorter fellow, so they had cast a guy who was more diminutive in size, which is perfect, and love Hugh Jackman and all that stuff, but I did love that scene. Spoilers, I don't think your listeners need spoilers right now for a film that's been out for a while, but, from Deadpool Wolverine, where we get to see a comic-accurate Wolverine. So those small pieces, attention to detail was really nice, and I love that they did that, and they came over and spent some more time with us, unsolicited. So that was a magical moment. We had a number of magical moments.
We get to have a picture with everyone in one big picture, and maybe we didn't all quite fit in there once we got a chance to look at it afterwards. But again, that's not something that typically happens, because usually you just kind of get a one-on-ones, or in one case, I think there was 3-on-1 because we got a bunch of mutants in one. But it was kind of, a fun, nice experience, and it was a crazy day for us because we'd been up since 4 a.m. We met at 5 a.m. We flew down to Orlando. We hit the ground running, go to the hotel, drop our stuff off, somehow magically get a suite instead of the room we're supposed to have, because they don't have our room. And I'm like, all right, we'll take a free suite. That sounds awesome. Go to the park. We have it's hot. We have a busy afternoon. We go to this great dinner. Like, it was a really solid first day. And then, like the nerds we are, when we're finally done with the park, we go back to our room and play Marvel United, because we brought enough stuff that we could play even on vacation, which is true testament to our geekdom, when it comes to Marvel United, I should say. And it was just a magical day. And again, I have to quickly ask you, like, have you thought any further about per park what you put as your kind of top 5 things?
Wait, are we doing top 5 everywhere, or like per park? Like, I guess you could say per park.
Per park, yeah. So one is the islands, and one's the Universal proper. Have you given it a thought? Because we talked about it a lot. So I'm curious if you codified it in your mind.
No. I mean, I guess the top 3 might be easier right now, just kind of trying to retread those memories. But for the Marvel Island, for the Islands of Adventure, the thing that stood out most to me, was Kong stuff, because I do like Kong and monsters. Jurassic Park, because that is one of my favorite movies still to this day. It changed me as a kid into someone who, I think that was the first movie I saw where I feel I was fully transported into a place, and it terrified me, especially that T-Rex scene. I think as a kid, looking back at that, in that memory, I almost felt trapped in the frame. Like I was there and I couldn't get away, and I was terrified. Like that was the first movie that really, I think, did something like that to me. So I love that we got to do Posing with Dinosaurs. That actually, again, not a ride, but would probably be in a top 3. The Velocicoaster, an easy number 1 with a bullet, that we went on multiple times. We tried different parts of the train. I said, hey, if the Leviathan in Wonderland is any way to go, there are certain rides that just really are better in the front because it feels like you're flying. We did that, and I think you had a really good time in the front of the Velocicoaster.
Oh, it was awesome. It was, it was terrifying because it accentuated the weightlessness that you felt. Because there's nothing else really in front of you when it's all happening. So you're really just kind of out there. There's a couple times where I'm like, I'm going to die now. Like that's, it's going to happen. Actually, on Dr. Doom's Freefall, there was a brief moment there where I'm like, I don't know how well built this is. I could die. Like I know that you felt that way because you were like, I don't know if this is securely fastened.
Yeah. My thing was clicking. My restraints, my protective restraints were doing this little click. So it would click in, notch, and then it would kind of snap to a higher notch or a wider notch. So I didn't know if it would fall out or not. And then the person came over and they just they tugged on it for a bit in a very unrefined, un-Dr. Doomy way, but it was still funny. So I didn't die, but I knew Adam would have grabbed my hand and would have had a great Marvel moment of you holding me in a way that, as I was dangling from some sort of precipice.
You did make me promise to take care of your cat. So, there was estate planning at the very end.
Yeah. So I would say in those islands, those lands, the Marvel theming, being there, being able to go was magical and has been a long time coming for me. And it's something I wish to do. So that is my favorite land there. But the best ride, I think, overall is the Velociraptor in that land. So, Velocicoaster. The Hulk ride, Hulk roller coaster was fun, but didn't do it's newer and it's more exciting than the Hulk one. So the Spider-Man ride is probably the best one for me in Marvel. And Velocicoaster, I enjoyed the King Kong ride as well, which is a combination of both screens and practical. I love practical effects. Even the E.T. one we did in the other park, we would go back and forth on different days. Very charming, very heartwarming, no screens, all practical. So that was something beautiful and magical about that. So I think I've done a top 3, right? Meeting Dinosaurs. No, it's 4. Meeting Dinosaurs, Velocicoaster, Spider-Man ride, King Kong ride, I don't know. 4? Okay, so that's pretty good.
That works. I mean, it's
just sitting around. We talked about this multiple times. Just sitting around in, for example, Captain America's cafe and looking at stuff, and then seeing people and getting their burgers or whatever. That's kind of its own special thing. Like a lot of the theming, and then the theming of just sitting and in the tropical Florida environment with the palms and fronds, and it's sweltering hot, and then they must have speakers back there because they'll have like the fences, the non-electrical, but they're the fences from Jurassic Park, and then you can hear like the sounds of these birds, and it sounds like the movie. So sitting in line for Kong at one point, which it shares kind of a boundary with Jurassic Park, felt like I was sitting in a movie. So can that be a 5th? Those kind of effects? Okay, cool.
One thing I'll make mention of, and it was interesting because obviously like we go and we love Marvel theming, obviously, and you love the Jurassic World theming. It's interesting, obviously, because a big part of both parks is Harry Potter, and that's an IP that neither of us have any connection to at all. But that's obviously a big driver for tourism to the area because people want to go to the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And I find it interesting just because, like, you can see how excited people are getting because they're there, right? And this land that they've only heard, well, obviously there's movies now too, but, in the books and the movies, and they're in this land and they get to, get their wand and they get to do all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Good for you guys. Like, I'm glad that, that they've been able to replicate it so faithfully and have it be something that matters so much to those people, because that's what it felt like for us to be at Marvel, or for, especially I know that we'll talk about it in a minute, even though we only have like 8 minutes left, that you really were bowled over by Simpsons Land. The Simpsons area in the Universal proper, because the theming was so on point and you felt like you were transported to this place that till now had only ever really existed on a screen or on a page if you read a comic about it. And suddenly, you're in Springfield. It felt like you're in Springfield. All these things that mattered to you and were such a huge part of you growing up, now you're there. So I have to at least shout out Harry Potter for that reason. The last thing I'll mention about the Island of Adventure, because it is special and fun, and whimsical, is the Seuss Land. There's a whole area that's dedicated to Dr. Seuss and those characters and that vibe. And I always find, even just walking through, to be a very enjoyable experience, because it just feels very, free. I don't know what the word is, but it just felt very whimsical and it felt fun. So it was nice to kind of walk through that. We did one ride, but we did it the proper way. We did 2 different ways because it went 2 different tracks, on one particular ride, but it was a lot of fun. We ate there. You ate at the Circus McGurkus, and I ate green eggs and ham, and it was great. So that is the last I'll say, I guess, about the Island of Adventure. So Universal proper, again, lots of motion rides. There was a lot of, you sit down, you watch a screen, you're in a car or some sort of thing, and you get jostled around. So unfortunately, it does feel like once you go into a bunch of them, you're doing a lot of them over and over again. So like that was true of Despicable Me, Minion Mayhem, The Simpsons. Well, yeah, I guess Simpsons ride too. Race Through New York with Jimmy Fallon, Fast and Furious, even though we didn't get a chance to go on it, and Transformers the Ride 3D. Like, they're all similar, which is kind of crazy. And there's nothing really that different. I guess actually, no, I'm thinking of a different one. But yeah, they're all kind of the same type of ride. But really the standout for me, and I know for you, was just being in Simpsons Land. You got the Simpsons ride, which is a lot of fun, but really being able to get a Krusty Burger and drink a Duff, or you did the proper thing. You did all 3 Duffs, throughout the course of our stay. We went to Bumblebee Man's, taco truck. Like, it was just a lot of really fun theming and being able to, eat this stuff that was very well themed to the land. So it felt like they really did an amazing job.
Yeah, I was not emotionally prepared for that. I imagine this happens a lot to people, and like you said, Harry Potter, and imagine for several Disney, experiences, people sitting there in the magical kingdom and a princess walks over to them or something, where they're hugging Mickey Mouse for the first time, to have something that that border between this is real, this is not real, that for so long fear-mongering people have tried to insist children don't know the difference, and they can't play video games because they're going to turn bad or evil or violent, and obviously kids can do that, can form that. But the power of any art to both, we can recognize that it is art and it's representational, but then also be swept away by it, to be captivated by it, be brought along. Spending my whole life, of course, knowing this is even that abstraction is even easier with a cartoon. Like, well, this isn't even really depicting anything that was ever real. and then you sit inside of a Moe's bar or a Krusty Burger, and it's got these bright, vibrant colors, and they've recreated an impossible simulacrum in real space. And I just wasn't really ready for how it hit me. And we sat there for a few hours and returned multiple times during our stay. And I could probably spend an entire day there. And it's not even a very large area. I could just kind of sit and talk, or they have clips from the show playing, to go on the Krusty Land ride, walking in a giant mouth of Krusty himself, and then episodes are playing and people are laughing to themselves or anticipating jokes, or not everyone in the rides maybe anticipating the joke the same way, but when there's 200-300 people lined up in a queue, and at least within earshot, you've got 50 people all laughing at the jokes that you love as a kid. And then there's new jokes. So they have posters they've created, and then there's additional content, and there's a cartoon once you get into the air-conditioned portion of the ride where they explain what the conceit is. And so they've just done another cartoon thing with Sideshow Bob and the person doing the instructions for the ride, or like prepare to disembark, or remain seated until the ride comes to a full stop, is Nancy Cartwright in her regular voice, just doing that. Like everything that they can, all those, I don't know, dopamine notes that they're playing in my brain just was intoxicating. So I greatly loved that. Easy choice for me. The Simpsons Land in Universal proper was my favorite, even though, again, the ride itself was fun, wasn't maybe my most interesting or favorite ride. That belongs to Jason Bourne, apparently. Like in a non-Simpsons context, the one ride event show that we never would have expected would be maybe our favorite in its own way was the Jason Bourne Experience, which we went on 3 times.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, the Jason Bourne Stuntacular. I don't think I had never been there before. I'd never done it. It was really enjoyable, much more enjoyable than we thought. It's funny because when we did it the first time, you were like, it might sneak into my top 5. And then, as we did everything else, and as it kind of sat with us, and then on the second day we saw it 2 more times. Although each time there was a malfunction, which actually was kind of fine because you have a guy come out and tell you a bit about the show because they're trying to filibuster time. It was much better than I think we thought it was going to be because, I didn't know what it was, to be honest, because when I was a kid, I remember there being a stunt show, but I think it had it was a live action, and well, this was too, but you know what I mean? Like, it was like outside and there was like cars and trucks and stuff. This was, you're at a theater and you see a guy, doing stuff and like interacting with other people around him, and it's like a stunt show. So there's a lot of simulated fighting. And then there's like this screen behind them, which is really what they say, 5,000, LED panels. And it looks like, the farther away you are, the more it melds into the image, and you start to lose the sense of what is on the screen and what are you actually seeing, and like what is actually in front of it. And I found that to be fascinating. It's funny because the last time we saw it, we sat the closest in the front row, which was the worst spot.
It was too close.
Because not only do we lose out, part of it was just we couldn't quite see over the lip of the stage, so some of the stuff was lost to us. But also we started this, you could actually see it more clearly where the definition was, whereas the farther back you are, the more seamless it was. And like there was an opening scene where Bourne is standing in front of what looks like a large group of people. Most of those people are not actually there; they're just on the screen. But it's so exquisitely done, you wouldn't know. And so there's a lot of, it was a very enjoyable experience. As I said, it was kind of our surprise hit, in terms of how much we enjoyed it. And again, we saw it 3 times. I'd see it again. It was a very enjoyable thing. And it's one of those things that's like a unique experience that you'll never get it anywhere else. Like it's a very unique thing that could never really be translated anywhere else. And like as a kid, I remember there was a Terminator show that was kind of melding the same idea. It was not obviously nearly as sophisticated, but it was furthering the story of T2, and it had all those actors. And that's something that, they were able to spend the money on and do. And even with Simpsons, to your point, like you got to see part of a cartoon you've never seen before. We're using older animation because obviously it's a lot crisper now and they use different processes. This was older animation. This is 10-year-old animation, if not a little bit older. So you're seeing something that has been like crystallized in amber until they finally run out of the license, and that'll probably just be in the ether. No one will ever see it again, which is crazy. So you got to experience like, a very specific, kind of one of a kind Simpsons experience that isn't elsewhere anymore, or won't be anywhere after it's gone.
If they take it out. So, I'm very happy I went. It might even, if they make a final announcement or eventual announcement that then we're going to remove it, I think I'd maybe want to go again one more time. It was so meaningful to me. And then we saw some other shows we enjoyed as well. I've already talked about the E.T. ride. I think I would really put that in there. Maybe a lower one in the top 5. Animal Show was cute, but for me, probably in the top 3 is the parade. I love the 6 o'clock parade. That was again, I thought it was going to be, I don't know, what is this going to be? There's some people dancing and then one of the first floats that wheels out is a large screen where it's kind of giving a quick rundown of some shots of some of the films that they're going to maybe celebrate in this parade. And I just thought, oh, is this it? Like, you're going to get a bunch of cheesy screens. Each float after this is just going to be a screen for for Jurassic Park, or a screen for Back to the Future. No, in fact, they were really detailed floats and had actors and cosplay, and you were remarking, look at even to the back, even to the reverse side of each of the floats, which is good. That's good float design because it should look good from every angle. Lots of little Easter eggs and mentions of the film. We talked about our apparently joint appreciation of just the art of dance and the enthusiasm that dancers are putting in who aren't dressed in cosplay, aren't playing, the leads of the films, but they're smiling all the time. They're athletic. They are giving it their all. They really look at they're present, and there's just something enthralling about the art of dance. And that's not a filler for me. It's not a filler in between. But like with the show we saw, oh gosh, what was it? It was like a history of animated films with Shrek and.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah, there was one in the DreamWorks world. I can't remember what it was called, but yeah.
Trolls and so forth. And for me, I'm sure the kids are all looking at the people in costume on stage, but the dancers off to the side were really just great little choreography, and they're giving it their all, and they're running around the room, and I was just like, I guess I like dancing now. I guess I just maybe always have. And so I liked both parks, and both one had something really special for me with Marvel and Simpsons Land, and then a lot of surprises of things that I wouldn't have expected to like. But the theming now I'm much more appreciative of, that detail. And that was the kind of thing that people would say to me, even when, like, I went to Disney World with my family when I was 12, and all I wanted was rides because my experience was like Canada's Wonderland. And there has been theming in Canada's Wonderland, but it's not necessarily has been my interest or my focus, nor is it, I suppose, as much of a park focus. And then Disney World or Disneyland, apparently they are, according to you, who've been a bunch, that's really a lot of the magic, like the experience, rather than your body being flung around. So maybe now I'm ready to go back to a Disney park and kind of take in the experience because I'm seeing it differently.
I would say, yeah, and that was definitely how I felt growing up too, is if you're going for thrill rides, you don't go to Disney. I would say you almost don't even go, Universal's different now, but there's a few, obviously some thrilling rides, but that wasn't the main focus. The focus is on bringing the movie magic to life. And I would say Disney does the same, at times better. And the more connection you have with the IP, obviously the more it matters to you. The rides there typically are not what you would call thrill rides in the same way that Wonderland is. I'd say Canada's Wonderland probably thrills you more. But you're also sitting in a line for a long time and there's nothing to look at. And there's nothing to kind of catch your eye. Whereas, we're waiting for a Simpsons ride for 45 minutes, but we're watching Simpsons episodes while we're doing it. Yeah. So there's no, and even if we've seen those episodes a million times, we're still watching something. It's still enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And, if we're waiting for the Spider-Man ride, we're watching a Spider-Man cartoon while we're waiting, there's something to kind of catch your eye. And, in, again, the Velocicoaster, you're watching the characters from the movie talk to you and they're building the story behind the ride you're about to go on. There's no story at Wonderland. It's just, we're going to throw you now. Which is fine, but there also was a time when they used to have story back when they were, owned by Paramount. I guess the last thing I would kind of point out, and we kind of steamrolled past it. There is a Minions area, which for people who are a big fan of Minions, that definitely matters a lot to people. Again, not specifically our focuses, although I made you go on one ride and made you wait too long just because I tear up because the story is about adoption, and I have an adopted daughter, and so it always hits a little different for me. But yeah, no, it was a tremendously fun time to be at Universal. As you said, my favorite part of the first time we did the parade is that you kept looking I was pointed towards where it was coming from, and you weren't. So we would see something it would only be after something kind of crossed into your threshold you would see it. So I'd be like, you'd think that was it, and I'd be like, oh shit, look at that, and you'd like turn around and you're shocked every time. Probably my favorite moment, because you continuously getting shocked by the next float. And it's because you weren't looking in that direction. I was looking in that direction, so I saw floats before you did.
And also my expectations were low. Right. True. So it was that combination too that I was like, well, that's probably the best one there is. And then finally when I got hit with the dinosaur, I'm like, cause it kind of fell out of my head. I was like, well, there's no dinosaur. And then all of a sudden Jurassic Park is there and there's a big old T-Rex. And I'm like, wow.
The last thing I'll make mention of, even though we're over the time that I had imposed upon us, is that we also got to take a quick sojourn to a comic book store, Gods and Monsters in Orlando, which was a lot of fun. It was open till 1:30 in the morning, which is bananas, because that's just not something that happens here. But it's a late night comic book store. They had, I would call it less of a bar and more of a club in the background. It had more of a club atmosphere. We didn't make it in because there was a 40-minute wait. And if we had known when we first got there, we probably could have filibustered our time looking at the store. But, otherwise, we did not. But, it was really, a fun store. We both found things that we were, had not been able to find elsewhere. You got 2 Action Comics trades by Grant Morrison, for Superman. And I found a book on Spider-Man that I actually started reading today, which was a Tom DeFalco, Creators on Spider-Man book that was about 20 years old that I tried to buy last year on Amazon, and they kept stringing me along for 6 months and then said, nope, we canceled it. We can't get it. So I was holding this in my hand. I'm like, I think I've got this, but I'm not sure, and I'll just buy it. And I did, and I was very happy I did, and I was sitting down to read it today. So that was a fun experience. I just want to shout out Gods and Monsters in Orlando because it was a lot of fun. One last comment that tickled me today. So when we go on these trips, I have a US dollar credit card, so I put all the charges on my card, and then eventually I kind of give you your bill at some point, and I'm still waiting for all the charges to fully settle. But it does fill me with glee to be able to look at my credit card statement, and it says Krusty Burger, Quickie Mart. Like, it's not some other name, not Universal, blah, blah, blah. It looks like I went to the Quickie Mart on this day. Yeah. I went to Krusty Burger. So that was a lot of fun to be able to see that. I think one says Fleming Moe's. So that was fun.
That's cool. Keeps on giving, that theming.
It does keep on giving. They really adhere to the bit. So, anyways, not only thank you for being on this episode, but also thank you for going to Universal.
But thank you for encouraging me. Like, you knew that it was something I wanted to do, and you just said, like, this is the year, this is when we're going to do it. You gave me that little push that I needed, and I thank you for that. It was a great trip.
I got to be the planner, because usually my wife does all the planning for all of our trips to theme parks. So I got to take the bull by the horns and guide us through. And yeah, it was a great time. We limited, unfortunately, Paul Suarez was not able to join us this time. Maybe sometime in the future he'll be able to get it together. Yeah. And join us.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
It was a tremendous time, so thank you again so much. To people listening, thank you for putting up with 47 minutes of this vanity project. You can email us at comicshenanigans@gmail.com. Rate the show on Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify. Next week's episode, hopefully, will be a Book of the Month Club talking about the Clone Saga, although the last couple times we tried to record with Paul, he was woefully unprepared, so maybe it'll be something else that we randomly do out of nowhere. A little bit of shade thrown at Paul today. That's twice.
We love you, Paul.
And future episodes include interviews with Mark McLaren. We're also going to be having Brian Cunningham back on the show. He was just on the show last week, and he was tremendous with his time about talking about the early days of Wizard Magazine, the comics magazine. Anyway, so that will be some great stuff coming up. So again, thank you so much for listening. Nate, thank you for joining me, and we will catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.